very warm welcome to this episode of the HuddleUK podcast, episode 12, where we're looking at the AFC East. I'm the host, Philip Marsh. As always, thank you very much for listening, and apologies at the start for no episode last week. Work commitments got the better of me, and sometimes we have to prioritize things. So no episode last week, but we're back with a bang this week, and an exciting episode where we're looking at the AFC East, as we said: Buffalo Bills, Miami Dolphins, New York Jets, and the rebuilding New England Patriots. We've got three HuddleUK writers joining the show today. We've got Jake for the Bills, Dan for the Jets, and Lee for the Dolphins. And then we're delighted to have Clare Cooper from A Clare Perspective joining us to talk all things New England Patriots, even at the end of the episode. We go in order of how the teams finished last season. So we'll be starting with Jake and the Bills, working through to the Patriots, who were bottom in 2024. Just before we get into things, as always, a quick plug for the website. Please go and check out all the great online content. We've got our first HuddleUK mock draft up there, and all the teams, 31 other writers, including myself, writing for that site, writing brilliant content. We're always gearing up for draft mode now. It's early April, so we're looking forward to that in Green Bay. So there's more and more content going up every single day. Enjoy that over there. But without further ado, I'll stop rambling. We'll get into the meat and bones of this episode, starting with the Buffalo Bills. So starting us off today, we're going to start with the defending champions, the five-time back-to-back defending champions of the AFC East. That is, of course, the Buffalo Bills. So joining us is a good friend of the channel and the website, and our Buffalo Bills writer, Jake. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. How are you?
Very well. I see you're sporting a fresh new Buffalo Bills cap as well, although the green tint is interesting.
It's very Jetsy, isn't it? I'm doing it out of solidarity with our Jets writer, who's probably gone through the mill the last 12 months. So, yeah, this is for him.
12 months and a bit more, I'm sure, for the Jets. We'll get to Dan. He's going to be on this episode later on. I'm sure he can talk about all the suffering. But we're going to start, as I said, with the Bills. It's been a busy offseason, as it is for every team. I feel like I say that for all 32 teams. You've spent a lot of the offseason, Jake, stealing players from us, the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, very happy with our acquisitions there. Obviously, I know you're a big fan of Joey Bosa. And yeah, for a long time, I think he's been very productive. And then I think the Josh Palmer acquisition is pretty underrated, to be honest. I think a lot of people were kind of sleeping on that one, but I think we said the same thing about Curtis Samuel. So, like, we'll see.
Yeah, I did. I was Team Curtis Samuel about this time last year. Josh Palmer for the Chargers has been a good wide receiver 2, a very good wide receiver 3. He had a moment where he was the first choice guy when Keenan and Mike Williams were out a couple of years ago, and was serviceable, I think would be the word I'd use. But behind someone like Shakir now for you, as you say, not necessarily a sleeper, but a good signing.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of he's pleased the nerds. The nerds seem to like him. He does very well in getting separation. He's not particularly quick, I don't think necessarily, but the stats certainly seem to suggest that separation is good for him. And obviously we don't have much in the way of separation other than Khalil Shakir. Keon Coleman isn't that guy. Dalton Kincaid isn't that guy. So I think Josh Palmer really kind of fills a need for the team on a relatively cheap deal as well. So kind of quite pleased with the way they've managed to structure that.
What would you say for Keon Coleman rookie season, if you had to give him sort of a grade of how it went? It was by no means perfect, but it wasn't the worst rookie season of all time either.
No, I think he showed flashes. I think what people really underestimate is that he had that wrist injury for a long time, and when you're a rookie and you're gaining momentum, you're really building rapport with your teammates as well. This isn't like a seasoned vet who has spent years in the pro game. He's coming out of college. He's learning the playbook. He's learning where to line up and how to, really play in what is a slower system, which means you can't afford to make mistakes. Whereas in the college game, you can really just rely on the fact that, if you're up against a 3-star recruit and you're a 5-star recruit, you can probably just dominate them regardless of whether you make a mistake or not. That wrist injury really set him back. And I think for me, if I was to grade it, I'd probably give him a C. Personally, I think, nothing too spectacular, stunted in many ways. Didn't help that everybody continually had the comparisons against Xavier Worthy, who seemed to get better and better as the season went on. But I think over the course of their careers, I'm still pretty bullish on Keon Coleman versus Worthy for what it's worth anyway.
for what it's worthy. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy is a name which I'm sure gives you nightmares, and we're going to get onto in a bit. But just before we get onto that,
Yeah.
the re-signings as well as the new guys in the building. But Terrell Bernard and Gregory Russo are two guys I know you wrote about for the Huddle UK website. Two guys who I can see from just reading the words in front of me, very pleased to have back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that obviously Brandon Bean was very keen to do, whilst everyone else was out fighting over the free agents in the market, he's been quietly going about his business, just simply bringing back the players that have worked for the Bills and built us up to where we are now. And obviously Shakir, Bernard, Rousseau, and now Benford, which is the biggest one. I think that's very astute business as well. He obviously got the Josh Allen extension done. That deal looks like it's going to age really well over the next couple of years. Even Josh has openly admitted that, which shows a level of maturity you want from your quarterback who's hopefully aiming to have the team built around him. So I think all of those deals, all being well, will age well, which means that the Bills are really set up for success in the future, hopefully.
Nice pun in the first episode of this podcast, which was Bo Nix or no Nix, when speaking to Mark, our Broncos, right, see which quarterbacks he'd prefer over Bo Nix. There was a lot of quarterbacks he would have picked over Bo Nix. Of course, the list would be shorter when it comes to Josh Allen, or is there no list?
Um, I don't think there's a list. I think that if you situationally play Josh Allen, I think in the open stadium that we're going to have in the future in Buffalo as well, there's not going to be a roof, to the chagrin of many. I think if you factor in that he is 6'5", 230 plus pounds, if it's minus 10 degrees and you've got Josh Allen running towards you, or you've got Josh Allen out of the pocket, the idea that he's either going to throw a ball that can punch through the cold air and the snow and the wind, or run over you as a linebacker, that is terrifying. You don't have that with Lamar Jackson. You don't have that with Patrick Mahomes. Yes, they bring their own skill sets, but I think what you ultimately want is you want a quarterback of those dimensions, of that ability. So for me, like, maybe if Buffalo were to move, and then the Bills were to move somewhere else, you'd have a list. But I think for Buffalo, he is the perfect quarterback.
If you got offered Jaden Daniels in a straight swap,
Um, oh no, not a chance. As much as I was very impressed with Jaden Daniels, I think that my concern there is he is on the slight side for a quarterback, and I think in the modern game, I am concerned. I do have my concerns about him, not talent wise, but just holding up. I think we saw his rib cage will get rattled last year, and I think that it wouldn't surprise me if we see that again in the future if Washington don't protect him properly. So no, I'll take my juggernaut. Thanks.
we're talking, well, right now, me and you are talking on Tuesday evening. This episode will come out on a Saturday, so there's quite a lot of wiggle room. And by the time this episode goes live Saturday morning, all this could have been resolved, or it could have developed even more. But James Cook, the headlines today and yesterday are the drama of him wanting a better deal for the Bills, getting up his numbers. He went from a 1,100-yard rushing season with just 2 touchdowns in 2023 to just scraping above the 1,000-yard mark in 2024, but 16 touchdowns on the ground, an additional 2 more through the air. Do you, I guess, do you see his argument? Do you think it's fair for him to be requested more after what would only be 1 year of elite productivity in the NFL?
We saw that there were moments, kind of certainly as the season went on, there were moments. I mean, I think the touchdown that he scored, I think it was against the Chiefs, I think, in the playoffs, where he reaches, and it, that is the difference between having a mediocre back and an excellent back and a game changer. He does create mismatches in the backfield. There's no denying that. James Cook doesn't have the touches yet that you would expect from a back that would demand 15 million a season. It just simply isn't the case. You look at what Saquon and maybe less so Christian McCaffrey, but those two, and certainly maybe also Derrick Henry, less so for being a three down back, but Saquon and CMC are both 3 down backs. They touch, or they see 70% of the touches almost. and they completely changed the dynamic of the game. James Cook doesn't do that. James Cook has got Josh Allen, who's also got a run game as well. There was certainly death by 1,000 paper cuts last year with the number of receivers that the Bills, Matt Collins was catching touchdowns. So unfortunately for James Cook, he's got Ray Davis, he's got Ty Johnson who are taking touches away from him. I just don't see it. And I think that the reason why his agent has come out so strongly, and why he's come out so strongly, is because they've seen the writing on the wall with everyone else getting their deals, and they don't have much leverage. If you look at the fact that he can play out this year, and then they could franchise tag him, and then before you know it, he's starting to get a little bit older. You'll have had a lot of touches, regardless of, he's not really in a position where he can start to hold out, unless he really wants to walk away from paychecks. So right now, it's with the Bills, and the Bills are one draft pick of a running back away in the next season or two from him losing all leverage. So I think this is just a bit of kind of posturing, but I don't think the Bills will be necessarily kind of conceding to him in the same way that they wanted to get the Benford deal done, and they wanted to get the Russo deal done. For them, that was ultimately a priority. I think they showed that.
Well, we'll probably talk about the draft then, because cornerback you've already mentioned. We'll open that door to the elephant in the room. Your selection in the Huddle UK mock draft was Maxwell Hairston, the cornerback from Kentucky, and the first name mentioned in your description wasn't Maxwell Hairston, it was Kyer Elam, because of that game in the AFC Championship where he got absolutely torched by Xavier Worthy, who, as I said right at the top of this chat, is probably still living in your nightmares. Kyer Elam is now gone. He's no longer on the side. You're nodding in approval there, I assume.
We got a fifth. We got a fifth back in return. I cannot, the patience that I've had, and I was very impressed. I believed in the Kyrie Irving pick coming, the stories about him on draft or prior to draft day, the way in which he enamored himself with the coaches, the research and work that he did in studying. I mean, he had binders and binders in his interviews with the Bills about players that he'd studied and how he would cover them. That's the work ethic you want to see from your first round cornerback. We knew coming out of Florida that he was a bit handsy. He is a press man, a rangy press man corner, so we knew that he was a bit handsy. Didn't realize he was going to be that handsy, and ultimately it just meant that he was either a holding call or he was just going to get torched. And unfortunately, you could probably argue that him having to come in and play so many serious snaps instead of Christian Benford in that conference championship game, the Chiefs just moved Worthy to wherever Elam was. It didn't really matter where you put him on the field. He was giving up so much space for the kind of the curl route. It was painful to watch in the end. It almost made me want to stop watching at points. But I felt for him, but ultimately, he's got to be kind of I think we saw the accountability play out over the summer.
Yeah, I remember our WhatsApp group that night, and there were some words that probably couldn't be repeated on this podcast.
Choice words.
Choice words going into that group that night, which we won't go through. Cornerback, as you mentioned, Maxwell Hairston is the guy you picked in that. Is that you genuinely think the Bills will be looking at if he's on the board come pick 30?
You know what? No, I don't actually. So, in many an ironic way, I think there will be other cornerbacks on the list that I think will potentially be more of an interest to kind of Coach McDermott. The reason why I chose Maxwell Hairston was purely for the element that he is the fastest corner. His 40 time of 4.28 is insanely quick, and I think sometimes what you can see is, if you know that you're going to face Xavier Worthy potentially at least, every season, at least once potentially, maybe more, you're going to want someone that you could actually just put on him and match him up and know that he's not going to cause you those same nightmares. So sometimes you see that with coaches and GMs that, certainly if you look at how the Jaguars tend to run their free agency, they tend to just go out and sign whichever wide receiver has torched them the previous season. I do wonder whether or not the Bills will just look at the fastest corner and say, take him, solve some of our problems against some of these speedier guys. But I do think there are other corners out there that will probably take their fancy.
Namely,
So I think my initial pick was Azaria Thomas, just because I think that they saw something in Kyrie Lim. They wanted that tall, rangy corner, someone that brings something different to Christian Benford. If you look at our cornerback room right now, our secondary, it's not very tall. And I think that for all my picking of Maxwell Hairston will solve the Xavier Worthy issue. What's it going to do when we've got to face the Justin Jeffersons, the Brian Thomas Juniors, even the DK Metcalfs or George Pickens, whichever one. So when those games come around, how are you going to cope? So I do see us probably taking a slightly bigger corner in that respect to fill that role. But then, having said that, players like Rasul Douglas hasn't come back to the Bills, but he's still out there in the market. So there are still options out there in the cornerback market. Asante Samuel hasn't signed anywhere yet, has he? I'm not seeing that. I'm sure you're keen to see him come back, maybe. But so I think there are probably the taller range here. I think will be obviously the likes of Will Johnson will be gone by the time we're on the clock.
just looking at the Bills' schedule, you mentioned some of the wide receivers you're going to come up against next year, and you play the AFC North, which is the wide receiver locker room at the moment.
Yeah.
With the Bengals, and you have the Ravens, and you've got those two, the Pickens and Metcalf duo now at the Steelers. So, yeah, I see why cornerback is going to be a key issue. And you also play the Chiefs in the regular season this year, which will be interesting instead of the postseason fun. Speaking of postseason, fun might not be the right word when it comes to the Bills. It starts off fun. It doesn't end up fun particularly, or ever, notoriously.
Yeah. I'm currently wearing. I think this is 1990, 1991. Yes, it is. It's the Giants, so it's the wide right. So I like to kind of remind myself, stay humble, because you never know. It's been a kind of a painful couple of years. But having said that, we spent 17 years not in the playoffs. And though I wasn't following the team for all of that, I think the fan base right now are appreciative of just having a good team. And you look at the Dolphins, you look at the Jets, you see the way the Patriots have gone now. It can be a long road back, and I think it's not lost on us as a fan base that that does suck, and we're just kind of appreciating some good football at the moment.
If you, while I totally hear your point, if you don't reach a Super Bowl though in this, not necessarily this season coming in 2025, but in this window of opportunity with Josh Allen, that will have to be looked back at as a disappointment if there's no Super Bowls there.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously there's a lot of pressure put on McDermott to get us over the line. There have been errors made. I'm not going to talk about 13 seconds too much. I think that's the second podcast in a row now where I've mentioned 13 seconds and then swiftly moved on. I'm not a big believer in the fact that we need to get rid of McDermott necessarily. I know there's a lot of fans that say that if he doesn't get us over the line, he needs to move on. I think that you look around a lot of teams. I mean, as a Chargers fan, I'm sure you're pretty happy now to have Harbaugh, but there's a period in between that where it's a long road of trying coaches out and not finding one. So for me, McDermott, I believe, we will eventually get there. We've just gone through two dynasties effectively of obviously the Patriots and then followed by the Chiefs. So it will be a shame it will be a massive disappointment if they don't do it. But I think we've got to be patient. I mean, Joe Burrow has made one. Lamar Jackson's not made any. There's so many good quarterbacks out there who, in some ways don't make any whatsoever. I mean, Philip Rivers is a prime example. I mean, you look at some of the. So I know you're catching strays here, but I'm tapping in, I'm tapping into your experience. But I mean, you look at that, you look at some of the offenses that he ran, and you think, yeah, I think didn't the Chargers have the best offense and the best defense one season? And yeah, so
Thanks. Yeah, let's just keep going back to that season.
yeah, okay. Aren't you glad you didn't have me on the AFC West episode? Yeah. So I think for me, yeah, it would be a shame, but I think it will come. I think it really will. And I think the next 3-4 years we're really set up with the moves that Bean has made.
Just she said catching straight here. Just one to round it off. Then your prediction or hopes, expectations for where 2025 finishes.
Oh dear.
Let's have let's go for the head answer and the heart answer.
So I think they're both really the same. I think that we've done nothing at this point in the season. It's April. So the new season has begun, but only barely. There's a lot of football, there's a lot of training camp, there's a lot of injuries that are to come. I think that we're Super Bowl bound. Probably my head is firmer on that than my heart. My heart will always be that sort of skeptic fan. But I think for me, if you look around the rest of the league and the holes that they've got, the moves that they've made, I think that you'd be hard pressed to look at any of the other teams and say, yes, the Bills made worse moves than those teams. Even if you look at Philly and how well are Philly going to necessarily repeat and some of the players that they've not necessarily been able to retain and things like that. Yeah, I'm very happy with where we're at this point in the year. But ask me again when Josh Allen goes down with a wrist injury in week 1.
So Bills for the Super Bowl. Bills for the Super Bowl is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but as you say, we're talking here in the first or second week of April. There's a long way to go before a football's even been, I'd say, kicked, but that probably analogy doesn't work as well until the kickoff of the season, let's say.
Yeah.
Jake, thank you very, very much for taking the time. Good luck to the Bills. I mean, I don't think the Bills need a whole lot of luck to go for the 6th in a row. But that being said, we're about to speak to 3 people who are going to tell me otherwise. And we're going to kick those 3 teams off with Lee and the Miami Dolphins. Well, we've ticked off the Buffalo Bills. Moving on now to the team that finished 2nd in the AFC East last season. That is the Miami Dolphins with an 8-9 record. Joining us to chat Dolphins is the HuddleUK's Dolphins writer, Lee Dobbins, who's over on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at East Leeds Lad. Lee, how are you doing?
Yeah, hi, Philip. Good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. I know a few months ago you wrote a story. It's one of the most read stories on the website, actually. It says why the headline was "Why I'm Always Grateful to My Dad." And he was the one, it sounds like, got you into the NFL, but he wasn't a Dolphins fan himself.
No, so he chose the 49ers, which was a really good choice, and regularly lauded it over me every playoff season when the 49ers were there and we were either struggling or getting beat early in the playoffs. But yeah, no, it was our thing really, along with football. We absolutely love the NFL, so when it became live and we could see it every Sunday, we'd sit and watch, and it was great fun and plenty of banter and just really fun times and happy memories. Yeah, absolutely.
I like the quote. It was like, "Don't worry, son, Marino will have them back next year." So you enjoyed the good years of the Dolphins as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that year when he threw for 5,084 yards and 48 touchdowns, it was just incredible. I think, we all felt as Dolphin fans that he was going to just walk through Super Bowls for years and years and years, and we'd end up with 5, 6, 7 of them. But a piece that I've sent to you today talks about the '85 championship game against the Pats when that was his last chance. Really, that was he got one more championship game against the Bills in '92 with a really good team that probably should have done better than it did. But yeah, we've had some good times. Not so many good times since, unfortunately.
I know. So you beat me to the punch there. The last time Miami, the Dolphins, won the AFC East. Do you know the answer to that question?
Wildcat year, Tony Sperano.
It's 2008.
Yeah.
You've got in. Since that, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 second places in the division, either behind the Patriots or more recently, of course, the Bills. From the outside looking in, a couple seasons ago, when you had Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle was one of the best wide receiver 2s, a great rookie season. Tua, pre-injuries, was looking very positive. There was a lot of hope. Now the mood feels completely different.
Yeah, very much so. And I think, if you, and I read a lot of the South Florida media, I'm subscribed to a lot there, and, the local fan base are up in arms about how the team just hasn't progressed, how poor both sides of the trenches are, how we've no depth whatsoever, really outside of the starting 11s. So, lots of angst, lots of concern. The news that's broken about Tyreek as well this week doesn't sound great. That all said, offensively, I think this team has some real strengths. And if Tyreek's on the field, it's still a team that can score 27 to 30 points a game, maybe 12 times a year. The concern would be, how can Weaver be so creative on the defensive side of the ball to ensure that we can win those games?
Yeah, Devon Achane, I really like. I think he's a great player, great running back, the sort of player on any play can bust open a 40, 50-yard run. You have lost Raheem Mostert. You've added Nick Westbrook-Akine. What have you made of the off-season moves?
Yeah, I think we've been cautious. I think we've had to be with the positions that we find ourselves in. And whilst we've still got cap space, I'm not sure necessarily what the next move is. The 5 to 7 million to pay for the draft picks. That's still roughly around $15 to $16 million in cap space. So there's opportunity there to make some form of a splash. The retirement of Armstead, Calais Campbell obviously moving back to Arizona, hurt us in kind of areas such as leadership and focus. And you may or may not be aware that there's been real critique about how Coach McDaniel has handled the locker room. Some of the things that he's let guys get away with in terms of being late for meetings, skipping practices and so forth. So there's some real questions coming into the draft and then obviously moving into the season.
He's an odd character, isn't he, Mike McDaniel?
He really is. He's incredibly bright, and his play designs and schemes are fantastic, and they're built on obviously the places that he's been earlier in his career. If he can get the offense to anything like 2023 levels, then this is a team that can absolutely do some damage. But that's a big if, and he's got to, hopefully the coaching additions that he's made will allow him more time to scheme and plan. And please God, someone take play calling away from him, because if he calls another 4th and 1 fade into the corner, I think everyone will just go completely insane. So
last season was disappointing, wasn't it? Although the Dolphins, I think, come week 18, were still in with a shot, weren't they?
They were, but I think that was a combination of several factors that, when Tua came back, they played reasonably well. They lost a 1-pointer to the Cards. They lost in Buffalo to a career-long field goal, 60-yard field goal, I think. Had they won those 2 games, then you're looking at a completely different, they're in the playoffs. But they weren't a playoff caliber team. I think, 8 and 9 was probably reflective of the team that they were. They had some critical injuries. Players who'd really contributed the season before, like Mostert, just couldn't get going and couldn't get on track. I mean, Mostert probably cost them a couple of games with crucial fumbles, which was a real shame. He's a fantastic guy to have in the team and the locker room, but it just didn't work. I think many fans are hopeful that Jalen Wright will burst out this year in the way that Achane did 2 years ago. Indeed, there's some talk that they've been looking at receiver sets with Achane playing slot and Wright as the running back, which is really, really interesting to hear, because that's then a lot of speed, and you can't cover everybody, because if you've got Tyreek, you've got Waddle, and a fit Waddle is still a fantastic asset to have. You've got Jonnu Smith, who is perfect for that scheme with his ability in yards after the catch. And then Achane as well. That then presents some real matchup problems for pretty much every D in the league. So
he had a bit of a career year last year, Jonnu Smith. I had him on a couple of fantasy teams, just on the benches in dynasty leagues, and then it got to like week 8 or week 9. I was like, I think he's my starter now, out of nowhere.
Yeah, broke Dolphin records for yards and catches. Yeah, for a tight end.
There we are. Well, that was a surprise for me last season. The other article you wrote before we get onto deep dive into the draft. You wrote on the 14th of January, and I think the date's funny because it's called the wild world of NFL draft research. The Dolphins are out of the playoffs, and you're like, right, first thing we do, we looked at April already. Your first sentence was too soon, which I loved. And then you've listed 5 different things that people do during this research stage, mock drafts and learning 200 names that you'll forget. But my favorite one was overhyping random prospects who just have that dog in him. Have you got that guy for yourself this year that you've been looking at, who you just like, regardless of what everyone's saying, you're like, he's the dude, I'm set?
I've been going backwards and forwards, to be honest with you, on because I think we've got an opportunity with the number of picks that we have to package up and maybe get another second round pick. Now, whether or not they'll do that, because there's certainly a view that we're an old team and that we need to get younger and change the culture, as we kind of touched upon. So whether that actually happens or not, I don't know. As I wrote for the draft, for the Huddle draft, I think having a lockdown corner opposite Jalen is essential. I think we've got some real impact players on the edge. If Phillips and Chubb come back even 75% of what they were, then that's a tremendous asset to have for those two guys. Chop Robinson had a fantastic second half of the year. Didn't necessarily get the eye-catching numbers, but was incredibly disruptive. So, if we can get, and obviously Zach Sealer is and should have been a Pro Bowl player, is fantastic season again, 2 back-to-back years, didn't miss Wilkins at all, incredibly. And obviously did benefit from having someone like Calais Campbell there as well to help. But if we can get that lockdown corner, that level of pass rush, I think we need to be stronger against the run. And that's been a Miami problem for 40 years, and it doesn't matter who's been in charge. We've never been able to stop the run with any kind of consistent degree of success. So, yeah, I've gone backwards and forwards, but I still think in the first round, the cornerback that I suggested is the way to go.
Yeah, Will Johnson out of Michigan was your pick at pick 13. One of the best, if not the best, cornerbacks in the draft. There's a few who will be first-round picks. That depends if you class Travis Hunter as a cornerback or not. I don't know what to call him. He's a bit of an enigma, isn't he?
He really is, and what a talent! Just an incredible player, and I can see him doing some two-way stuff in maybe his first year, just to see where I think teams can where he can hurt teams, because he certainly can. Absolutely incredible talent. I can hear already from all around the world Dolphin fans shouting at me, going, "It's the interior of the offensive line, stupid." And it is. Our season is completely built around the fact that we keep Tua upright. If we keep him healthy, now here's a guy who is currently the career 9th ranked pass completion QB in NFL history. So you keep the man upright, and he'll be a beast. He's absolutely. People said that you aim for a window, and I remember opposition head coach saying Tua can hit the keyhole. So he's that accurate and that respected around the league. So I've got a huge amount of faith in if we can keep him upright. But the issues there are going to be, what do we do now at right tackle? Patrick Paul is the heir apparent. Struggled a little bit last season when he played for Armstead, but they're very, very confident that he can fill in. But there are still holes on the offensive line. We probably need another swing tackle, and we certainly need a guard. But if we can do that, I think offensively, as I said earlier, this is a team that can certainly get to 10 or 11 wins, and the pathway to that. And I'm sure in your other conversations with the AFC East writers, the pathway to that is finding a way to go 5-1 in the AFC East. And we have to sweep the Jets, and we have to sweep the Patriots, and we've got to find a way of at least beating the Bills once. And if we can do that, I'm reasonably confident we could probably go 6-5 against the rest of the NFL, because that's only 500 ball, and there's enough talent there to be a 500 ball club. So, if we can get to 11 wins, get a playoff berth, and then, hopefully a home game, and we're not having to travel anywhere freezing cold, and we're in with a shout.
Yeah, they don't travel well, do they? Just to circle back to Tua for a moment, as you say, when he's upright and when he's healthy, is exceptional. But, and it's a big but, isn't it? Do you worry? Because I'm not a Dolphins fan, and sometimes I watch Tua when he's getting pressured, and I just wince, like in fear for him.
Every drop back, and that's why the scheme involves a lot of the routes that it does, because you can't guarantee that they're going to give him more than 2.5 seconds to pass the ball. So, that's why the importance is leveled at, it's certainly in rounds 2 and 3 of the draft, is getting that next tackle, is getting that next guard to keep him upright and give him the time that he needs. Because had he got the level of time that, several other quarterbacks have, then, he can slice and dice with the best of them. Absolutely. So, but yeah, it's, you don't want him running. We had the other year where he was learning martial arts and learning how to fall, and he put weight on. He's still carrying that level of weight. I think he lost a bit last year. From what I've seen this year, he's put a bit back on. I'm hopeful that we can get to a point where he can be healthy for all 17 games. If he's healthy for 17 games, I think this is an 11-win team.
Bit cool. I like that. The issue last year when he went down was the quality of the backup quarterbacks was not there, was it? You've got Zach Wilson now, and Zach Wilson is, people have made their jokes about him and his time at the Jets. Maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm rose-tinted glasses here, but I think as a backup quality quarterback, he's a good one to have.
It's a step up, absolutely, from what was in place over the last couple of years. Going back to Bridgewater, going back to Skylar Thompson, we've just not had the quality backup in place. He's got that NFL level of experience. He's started for a couple of years. I think he'll get a huge amount of confidence from working with Mike McDaniel, people like Darrell Bevel. He's got, I think, a good opportunity, and hopefully it's lots of opportunity to stand and watch and learn. But I don't think anybody would be panicking as much if Tua went down for another 6 games. Obviously, you hope that he doesn't and that he's there all season, but the likelihood is that, given his history, he's going to miss 1 or 2. And the 1 or 2 games that we lost very closely to the Colts, maybe last season, that was a game really that we should have won quite easily with any kind of decent backup QB play. And essentially, we lost it because we didn't have someone of the caliber of Wilson. And when I say caliber, backup caliber of Zach Wilson.
You said if Tua stays fit, that you think an 11-win season. Is that the ceiling? Is that the peak you think they can hit this year? Because you just said right at the start, there's still a lot of holes that need addressing on this team.
And I think that's why. I think there are so many holes. The depth on defense. You're worrying about the fact that Chubb and Phillips are coming back from really bad injuries, and Phillips from essentially 2 bad injuries back to back. We've not got another lockdown corner, and Jalen isn't the man that he was, the player that he was. He had a little bit of a down year last year. We're going to need 2 new safeties regardless of the free agents that we've brought in. So there's holes there. There's issues with depth. But that offense, if it gets anywhere close to 2023 levels, can score 28, 30 points a game, 12 times a season. It's whether or not the D can hold that up, hold up their end of the bargain to win those games. Are they a Super Bowl contender? They'd have to get very hot at the right time, as it stands right now. But they're certainly capable of winning, getting into the playoffs, winning a playoff game, and then from there, who knows?
And what's your message then to the rest of the other 3 writers who we're going to have on here today from HuddleUK for the AFC title race?
I said earlier on, very much tongue in cheek, the Jets are going to jet. They are by far our most natural kind of rivals, I guess, and always have been historically. I still don't see them as anything other than maybe a 6 or 7 win team. I don't see enough strength in there. While the Jets have got a very good D, I don't see them offensively carrying a major threat on any kind of consistent basis. I think the Patriots will continue to improve, and if I was to worry about a team, they would be the one. New coach come in, will build the right culture, has made a lot of really good moves already. I think they'll be very active in the draft. They've still got a lot of cap space. So yeah, I think they will improve. I still think it's all about Buffalo. Everything goes through them until another team proves it otherwise. Yeah, they've made a lot of good moves in the offseason. They will continue to be very strong. I think they are still the favourites for the division. I would be stunned if they don't win it. I'd be delighted, of course, if we did, but I'd be stunned if they don't. So what we're looking at is obviously trying to break through and find a way to beat them and beat them when it matters.
Well, interesting. We've already spoken to Jake, our Bills writer, in this episode. Let's see what Dan and Claire, who are having on, have to say in his rebuttal for the Jets and the Patriots. So third up, thank you to Lee and to Jake for Buffalo and Miami chat. Now we're going to move on to the team that were third in the AFC East last season, and that is, of course, the New York Jets, who finished with a 5-12 record. Very disappointing season, as it tends to be in recent history for the New York Jets. Joining us to talk New York is the Jets writer for HuddleUK, Dan Till. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. How are you?
Very good. We were just saying before we went live that supporting a team like the Jets, it hardens you for life.
It really does, yeah. It makes you appreciate when there's a modicum of just like what's the sort of word, competence that goes on, because it very rarely happens. So when something nice happens, you really appreciate it.
There was a level of optimism going into the last couple of seasons, wasn't there, with Aaron?
Yeah, yeah, really good. And it felt like we'd finally got the quarterback. Obviously, a couple of years before that, everybody was saying the defense was there, one of the best in the league, which it was. Obviously got Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. So yeah, it did feel like it was just the quarterback that was missing. And obviously Rodgers got injured in that first game at against Buffalo. But even for the rest of that season, the Jets were pretty competitive in a lot of games. It was only towards the end of the season, I think, once they realised they weren't going to get near the sort of playoffs, that I think there was some bad performances. But there was like, we played the Chiefs really hard. I remember on the Sunday Night Football, we beat the Eagles, I think. So there was a lot of good performances in there. But I think last season really showed that I think it's so much down to coaching. I think this league, it's just, I think if you haven't got the right guys calling plays and doing the stuff in the week, I think it's a slog. I don't think it really matters how much talent you've got. I don't think you can overcome deficiencies in coaching at all.
The Jets are one of the teams that have had one of the busier off seasons. Aaron
Yeah,
Glenn's the new head coach now, new quarterback in Justin Fields. How are you feeling about the moves that have been made going into 2025?
yeah, I was pleased they got Glenn. I think I've I used to sort of think it was like, oh, you can't have a defensive guy in the sort of modern NFL, but I actually don't think it matters too much. I think if they get the right staff around them, I think it doesn't really matter if they're a defensive guy, an offensive guy. So yeah, I'm happy that we got him. He seems like he's the sort of the interviews I've watched him. He seems very sort of focused and driven on what he wants to do. Sort of saying that it's not about the playoffs or anything. They've actually got to build the culture first before they even think about winning games. They've actually got to get sort of off the field and all that sort of practice stuff right, which I really like. So yeah, I'm hopeful, and he's played for the team, so he sort of knows what the fans sort of expect. I don't think the fans expect tons. I think but if they play hard and look well coached, I think fans will put up with quite a lot for this season. But I think if they see the same sort of patterns of stuff, I think that's where there could be like, do you know what I mean, sort of discontent amongst the fans. But hopefully, I think with the staff he looks to have assembled and the new GM, hopefully there's maybe a turnaround. It won't be happen overnight, but give it a couple of years potentially, there could be a decent team in there. Hopefully.
Yeah, as you say, he played for the Jets from 94 to 2001 and was most recently, I'm sure everyone knows, but the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, who I think they had basically an entire defense out on IR at one point and was still being competitive. So
Yeah,
it must give you hope.
yeah, 100%. And when you look, there's a lot of good, talented players on that defense anyway. So if they can stay healthy, I mean, like it must be for him, I suppose, being able to coach somebody like Sauce Gardner is going to be a bit of a dream compared to last year, I suppose, when they were picking guys up off the street and whatever to try and play. So if he stays fit, and I think there was a bit of I think he got a bit of a bad rap last season, Sauce. I don't actually think he was as bad as people made out. He was still one of the best. I mean, he doesn't get many interceptions, but people don't really throw at him. So it's hard to get an interception when the ball doesn't get thrown at you most of the time. And then they re-signed Sherwood at linebacker. I really like. I think he's a good player, and I think he's sort of ready to step up and take over from what Mosley has done for a good few years. Obviously, he was pretty much out most of last season, so he didn't play tons. So Sherwood really stepped up. So I'm glad to see they re-signed him. And Quinnen Williams is a really good defensive player as well, but he doesn't get tons of help because there's not much on that defensive line. So a lot of it is him getting double or triple teamed a lot of the time in it. So I think they need to find something there to complement him.
Me and Ben Isaacs were on this podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Justin Fields, and we were both sort of Justin Fields truthers. We still think that there's talent there. We still think he's a starting caliber quarterback. That's not necessarily a top 10, but a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Are you in that camp, or are you now in camp because he's a New York Jet?
No, I've liked him for a couple of years. I think you know what his deficiencies are, but I think if you play to his strengths, you could have there's a good player in there. I think looking, and again, from sort of hearing what Glenn's been saying, that I think we're going to try and be a physical sort of run team, and I think that'll suit him. You've got obviously Breece Hall, who there's potential rumors he might be getting traded or whatever, but if he stays around, which I think he will, you've got him, you've got Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen, Braylon Allen, who they drafted last season, who looked really good in his sort of limited role, really. But when he got on the field and got touches, he looked really good. And then so if you've got those three sort of good, and they're all sort of quite different styles of runners, and then you add Fields into that, I think you've got a really nice mix something that we haven't had for ever really is like a running threat from quarterback. Really, Zach Wilson every now and then might take off. Darnold used to, but they weren't designed runs. They were like, "There's nothing to do. I'm just going to try and run and get out of trouble." Whereas I think they can actually do a bit more designed run play stuff here with him, and then hopefully that opens up a bit more stuff for Wilson down the field. Because I think he's one of the most talented receivers. Probably a bit biased, but I think he's just shown that even with very, very bad quarterback play, he's still been pretty exceptional, really. So yeah, I'm hoping that they can free him up, and he's already got a connection with Fields from Ohio State as well. So hopefully that they don't have to take too long to get on the same page, which was something that was said about Rodgers and Wilson pretty much all last season, that they weren't on the same page, and which I don't know how much there is to that. Obviously, I've never really played, so I don't know. But hopefully, the fact that they have played together before does create some sort of instant chemistry, and we haven't got to wait till November to see them complete a pass to each other or something like that.
I think it's for dynasty fantasy football purposes that I love Breece Hall, but I was listening to another podcast the other day that said Breece Hall's never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Whereas
I read that as well. I was really surprised.
4 in a row, and that really screws with my head.
Yeah.
I thought that can't be right. Obviously, Breece Hall is top 1,000 yards with pass catching because he's a brilliant pass catching running back, but he's never on the ground hit 1,000 yards. I think he's brilliant. And like every time I see the Jets play, there were games where the offense is stuck, and I'm just give it to Breece. Like he seems to do something every time he's got the ball. And then Braylon Allen is an absolute wrecking ball.
Yeah, he's huge.
Huge.
Yeah, he's a big man.
Really young, isn't he? I think he's only in 21. So I like that as a 1-2. I think that's quite good. Garrett Wilson, as you say, is good. You have lost Devontae Adams. The wide receiver room looks thin, shall we say?
Yes. I don't think they'll be throwing it 30 times a game, put it like that. I think I like the Josh Reynolds signing. I think we signed him the other day on quite a cheap deal. I know he's probably more of a sort of role player, and he's not going to be a sort of consistent target, but I think he's shown little flashes with the Lions a couple of times when he was with the Rams previously. I don't think he played much last year, really. I think he was at Denver, was he, last year? I don't think he played a ton last year. But I quite like him as sort of like, maybe a 3. I know they just restructured Lazard's contract yesterday, I think they announced that. So he's basically playing for very little money, which is fine. I think if we'd have kept him on the deal he was on, not so good, but for a very sort of limited cash, I think that's fine. Yeah, but I think the passing game's going to funnel through Garrett pretty much. I mean, it was doing anyway. I think it's even more prevalent now just because of the lack of sort of other options, which again, I think that's where the sort of more designed runs for Fields, more of a committee in the running back room just to take the pressure off Breece as well and give everybody more touches. So I can see it's probably throwing 20 times a game but running it 40 or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think the rushing numbers are going to way out, outstrip the passing numbers this year.
I'm reading here, I've got up here who your sort of your dream targets are for the draft that you wrote a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Cam Ward was it? And Cam Ward, I think you've got in the HuddleUK mock draft.
Yeah. Yeah, which is crazy. I think if that happens next week, or is it, sorry, not next week, the week after when the draft happens, I don't think they'll be drafting Campbell. I think they'll be trading that for a haul of picks for this year and probably next year because he's obviously the number one prospect. But I can't see him falling even past Tennessee, to be honest with you. But unfortunately, our mock draft wasn't the real one because I'd have felt quite smug if that had happened in real life.
Who do you realistically think the Jets are going to be, in that range? Who's going to be on the board? Who would you be hoping they take? I know Tyler Warren, Mason Graham are both sort of players that get
Mm,
to that part of mock drafts.
yeah, I'd love if they went with Tyler Warren if he's there. I think I don't watch. I wouldn't profess to watch tons and tons of college football, but the things I've seen and the highlights, he just looks like you can sort of line him up anywhere. He'll make catches. He's even had, I think he even had a couple of hundred rushing yards last season, which is like for a tight end you don't really see that. Obviously, probably a bit easier to do in college than the NFL, but he just looks like the sort of player you can line him up wherever you want, line him up at the tight end, line him up in the slot or whatever, um, and he'll just be pretty consistent and reliable. Probably not as I don't think he didn't seem as hyped as what Brock Bowers was last year coming out. But he's still, I mean, if he's been projected as a top 10 pick, so he can't be terrible. He's going to be pretty, hopefully with the right coach, and he'll be good. I think that's who I would like them to select, but I think the realistic selection is going to be, is it Membu, the tackle
Yeah.
from Missouri?
Remember, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the realistic pick if he's there. We haven't really got a right tackle on the roster, and it just seems like, even though for years Jets fans have always been like, oh, the exciting, we pass upon exciting players. We could have drafted Bowers last year and went for Fashanu, but I think it's probably the right thing to do is to build up those lines, build up those trenches, because then that'll make the O line a pretty young group as well, who are sort of all under our control. So you'd have like Fashanu, Titman, Vera Tucker, Membu, and then I think John Simpson at guard as well. So it's a good young sort of line that could be together for a few years. And then if you sort of almost looking forward to next year, if you had like a high pick and you can pick a franchise potential quarterback next year, you might have a good line sort of already starting in front of him. So I think that's probably the pick they'll go with. Again, from what I've seen of the new GM and Glenn, they seem pretty level-headed, and I think they're going to do things the right way. But as a fan of wanting to actually see us score some points, I think I'd like to see Warren picked, but I think he might be passed over for Membu, to be honest.
I think it's going to be running the ball 50 times a game or whatever the Jets.
Exactly, yeah. You
Yeah.
can find another tight end probably off the street to do block for you. Do you know what I mean? And it could be that Warren would end up being sort of wasted potentially, but just from what I've seen about Warren, I've been impressed. So I think whoever gets him is getting a very good player.
Me, the Dolphins fan, was just saying the Jets are going to jet. He didn't seem to be worried about what the Jets can threaten in 2025. Do you think that there's a possibility of a playoff run?
I'd be surprised if there's a sort of playoff run. I would hope that what I want to see more of is that the sort of coaching looks good. The coaching has not been good for for multiple years now with the Jets. That it's just we look disorganised, unprepared. I know Aaron Rodgers. He's he's probably my favourite quarterback of all time. So when we signed him, I was extremely happy because I think when he's in his prime, I think he was just brilliant to watch. But there did seem a lot of an element of last season of he was running the team, and it shouldn't be that way. Like it doesn't really matter how big or how great a player is. They shouldn't be running the organisation. It should be coaching. It should be GM and then filters down through the coaching and all that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping this season I hope it's almost a little bit boring in some ways in that respect, that there's no sort of drama off the field. It's quite sort of sedate. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see a sort of clear game plan, especially on offense, because I just don't think that's been there for a while. Last season, it was basically Rodgers goes out there and just does what he wants. Like, whatever the play call was, it seemed like it would get overwritten and he'd be like, okay, we'll just do this instead. So I'm hoping there's a sort of a clear game plan on offense, and that we see some sort of progression for some of those young players as well, and some of those players get signed up, like Wilson and Sauce. I hope we get those sort of tied down to long-term deals.
How many wins would you be happy with?
Realistically, I think if they can win 6 games, I know that's more than last year, which might be tough to do, but looking at some of the teams they've got on the schedule, it's not impossible. I know Miami think the Jets are going to jet, but Miami, if they have to come to New York in December when it's slightly cold, they might have an issue if there's any rain or any snow. They might. I don't think they're going to beat. They won't beat Buffalo twice. They can definitely beat the Patriots at least once. So you can win a couple of games in division, maybe steal one potentially on the road at New England or Miami, depending on what time of year you go up there. And then yeah, I think some of the other games, it's such a week to week league sometimes as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Glenn has them pretty prepared and they win. They probably win a couple of games they shouldn't and probably lose a couple that they should, because that just seems to be the way. But I think as long as there's a bit of progression that you can see, then I think most chess fans will take that, because playoffs just aren't realistic. If they were ever going to do it, it was going to be last season, and they failed miserably. So,
Who do you think finishes higher than the Jets or the Patriots?
well, my head says that I think Vrabel obviously is just a more experienced head coach. They've got a good quarterback in May, although he's still got a lot to prove. He had a pretty obviously as a rookie, he still had a pretty ropey rookie season, I think, overall. But I think their coaching might, just the fact they've got a bit more experience, I'd say potentially they would take by maybe a win, maybe 1-1 win. But I don't think there'll be much in it.
Interesting. Well, we'll see what the Patriots' perspective is now as well. Dan, thank you very much.
Try to put the pressure on them. That's what I've tried to do there. Heap the pressure on them.
Let's see if it's worked. We're going to round off today's episode by speaking to Clare Cooper about the New England Patriots. Well, last but not least, we have to tick off the New England Patriots, a team with a great recent history, but not immediate recent history after a 4-13 finish last season. Joining us to talk all things Pats is the host of A Clare Perspective, co-host on Pat's Procrastination, and content producer at Pat's Propaganda. That is a lot of P's in there. It's Clare Cooper. Clare, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are things with you?
Very well. That is, you said just before we went on air, that is a lot of P's to get through in an introduction.
It is. We'd have thought, after Pat's Propaganda, which was set for me, obviously, by Mike Dussault, the great Mike Dussault of Patriots.com, I inherited that, so I had to stick with Pat's Propaganda. You'd have really thought that when we came up, myself and Chudders, with Pat's Procrastination, we'd have done something a little bit, more host-friendly, but I tend to do the intros, so he doesn't care. So I dug it for myself, really. But yes, it's a lot of P's and things to reel off, especially when we do the show really early in the morning, which is kind of a little bit like this. So I need to apologise for all the Huddle viewers right now. Phil's catching me quite early in the morning, mostly before work, mostly before not very much caffeine either. So I apologise now for anything that goes wrong.
Just
frankly.
on one cup of coffee myself. So we'll get through this. We will plow through this. We are talking on Wednesday morning. So also a bit of a disclaimer. If anything changes between Wednesday and Saturday when this comes out, it wasn't us. That is how it happened.
Yeah.
Also, just while we go deep diving into Patriots, I'm curious, one thing you said when we were talking about setting this up is that you're a big fan of tight ends.
I am.
Where did that love start? How come it's that position specifically?
Oh, wow. Okay. So any non-Patriots fans that don't follow me on Twitter won't know this story, but everybody that does will. The reason I fell in love with the sport was Rob Gronkowski. When I first watched, because I didn't realise the expanse of what the NFL was over here. It sort of, I was a bit late to the party, a good handful of years ago now. But it was watching him on TV, suddenly realised, NFL's on TV, this is great, and tried to absorb all of it. And just saw Gronk play. And at the time, I legitimately did not know the huge history that was behind New England that obviously I do now. I just watched this guy play, and there was dudes falling off him, and he was so funny and just so dominant in the game that it was it just made me fall in love with football. Felt like it was my team as well. It was really strange. I know a lot of people will just kind of poo-poo this, and that's fair enough, each to their own. Everybody fans their own way. But yeah, it was just an instant love of the sport, instant love of him and the team. And then obviously, unfortunately, he retired. So I had a rebound, which some of Pat's Nation know, Ryan Izzo. So yeah, we won't go there on this show. We won't discuss the soapbox that I stood on for Ryan Izzo for so long. We'll just breeze past that. But yeah, it was originally from Gronk, and the way that the position is so versatile, and it's involved in so many different sections of the offense. In the tight end room, they have to know so much because it's part of the running game, it's part of the passing game, it's the blocking, it's the being a pass catcher. It's so much involvement, and it takes so much to be a tight end. I understand that there's usually like they kind of give it a year when there's new tight ends into the NFL. They're sort of generally given a year because there's so much to get used to. And I think just the intricacies of that and everything that comes with it, and people will tease me because they'll say, oh, she only likes the big tall strong guys, but that's how I'll enjoy watching the sport. I like the dominant aggressive nature of the sport. I love watching it. Obviously safely, I am big for safety in the sport, but I'm also into the blood, sweat and tears. If you've read Tyler Dunn's tight end book, it's amazing. I do recommend that. Sorry, quick drop of that. But it's the way that the position personifies the sport for me as well, obviously on offense. So yeah, big love for tight ends, t-shirts and everything on patspropaganda.com. People, some of Pat's people, Pat's Nation know of my tight endage, and I do get teased quite regularly by guests on A Clare Perspective. So me and Mike Giardi are in loggerheads of who was right over Ryan Izzo, and I say I was and he say he was, and we both call each other stubborn, and then that's it, and then we just carry on. So yeah.
I think that's a very good answer. I like the tight end position personifies football. I think that's great, and I agree with you. You know, player safety is of paramount importance, but
Of course.
you know, that physicality, although I just said it now, was in our recent HuddleUK article of a bit of jargon that always comes up at the NFL draft, because if you're not physical, you really shouldn't be playing the NFL. They always say on the draft, like, real physical player. Like, yeah, of course. Unless it's a kicker or a punter you're talking about, that's kind of a given, you would think.
But we had a physical kicker as well. I mean, sorry to cut you off. We just let Joey slide. As I know you want to talk about offseason anyway. We let Joey slide go. We had a kicker that looked like a linebacker or something. So I was quite gutted when we got rid of him, because he looked like he could really fling you to the ground if you know, on a kickoff type thing. So that was unfortunate. But yeah,
Well,
definitely. We like the aggressive.
a nice first off-season move to get us into that topic of conversation, because the Patriots writer for HuddleUK, Johnny Dudley, wrote an article that's gone up today about the positional needs for the Patriots, and kicker is one of the positions he says would be a nice place to look at in the draft, but not an essential place.
Yeah.
He's listed left tackle and wide receiver as the two big gaping holes, and we'll get to draft or some players you might like coming into the draft. But what have you made of the offseason so far? Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins are kind of the marquee names that have come in. I think you've described yourself as, what is it on your Twitter account? Playfully cheeky. Matt Collins is just weird, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you make of Matt Collins and Stephon Diggs as new weapons now for Drake May?
I'm really glad that you asked me about this, because I wasn't sure. Because I did do an article for Pat's Propaganda when we first signed them, and it was simply because of my passion for the Patriots. I also have the reflective kind of disdain for the Bills. I apologize to any Bills people that are watching, because I know you're an NFL show, and I completely, understand that. And everybody, fans their own way and respect. So I respect you as a Bills fan, but I'm really sorry. I hate your team. It is what it is. It's divisional rivalry. And signing two of them, for me, it really invoked the emotionalness of it. Now, don't get me wrong. As when it comes to the players and their skill set and ability, it wasn't a knock on that in any way, shape or form. It was more the getting over the fact that I have and I know that Diggs came from Houston, kind of like it was Bills once removed. He was still a Bill to me because of the time frame of we were up against him, as the time frame of my fandom and stuff like that, seeing him as a Bill. So he was still kind of a Bill for me. So it was getting over that initial, we've just signed not even one, two. I'm quite interested now. I've heard a lot, so I'm warming up. And I know he's got a good skill set. I know he's a talented guy. There was a lot of that diva wide receiver stuff that I was concerned about. However, he won me round on the press conference that he did just after his signing. He does seem very matured and aware of what he's moving into. People can say, oh, well, they can say whatever they want. Yeah, of course. As he said, show me, sort of thing. But when he was up there and he was talking about the young wide receivers and sort of developing them and, helping them in a way. Sorry, I'm not quoting verbatim, obviously. to me, that was a really good indication that this guy is smart and he knows what he's walking into under Vrabel. And that gave me a lot more confidence in the situation. Still, however, there's that asterisk of, well, he's a Bill. So once they both put the Patriots uniforms on and they're on the field and the Patriots, then I'm sure I will be, completely one round. But I have kind of had time to get over it now. Overall, generally, once I'm over the Bills thing, it's just good. It's good that they needed to, though, didn't they? I mean, the whole NFL nation knew that the Patriots needed to add something in their wide receiver room, and they needed to add something skill set dynamic, not just numbers, really.
Because looking at the wide receiver room, it's kind of a story of potential players drafted with, this guy has an upside or this guy has got potential. Jalen Polk, Keyshawn Butte, Demario Douglas, Javon Baker. I mean, particularly Polk and Baker last season. I don't know off the top of my head how many catches they had between them, but I think it's less than 20.
One of them, whichever way we're around it is, I haven't got it written down because you've thrown me now.
Here we
One
are.
of them had one catch.
Javon Baker had 1 for 12 yards and Jalen Polk had 12 for 87. So 13 catches between the two of them. I guess having these veterans around, Matt Collins and Stephon Diggs are not old, but they're in their veteran years of their playing career, might help these young guys, if they're only here for 1 or 2 years, might help these younger guys improve a step. So when they're gone, you don't necessarily need to draft more wide receivers. You've just improved on the guys you already had.
Yeah, completely. My opinion, just my viewpoint from it, my perspective is I'm worried if the skill set is really truly there. But I think if they stay under Vrabel, indicates that he sees that there's something there, because he's shipping out a lot of what was sort of brought in just before he got here in the likes of, and I don't know if you wanted to touch on it, but I'll just, drop with the whole Joe Milton thing. And like John Jones, Dietrich Wise, John Bentley. Vrabel, for want of a better phrase, I think T said it on his Pat's pod, a bit of cleaning house, a bit of kind of wiping the slate clean and getting it how he wants it, sort of thing. So it will be interesting in the sort of preseason to see what happens with Polk and Baker, with them being draftees from just prior to when Vrabel came in. And again, it depends what happens at the draft. I know everybody's talking about that now. I think we're about 3 weeks away now, aren't we? What they do at the draft. If Travis Hunter drops, if they go into the new season and they've got Travis Hunter, on the list as a wide receiver / cornerback, and they've got Stephon Diggs and they've got Hollins, where does Polk and Baker really fit? Then Butte, Bourne, Douglas. You've got a lot of names, not a lot of slots, and only bits of talent. So it's a very interesting room. And I think still going forward, when we talk about this sort of thing next year, I think we may still be looking a little bit of, I wonder what the room's going to be like, depending on what the draft happens this year, though.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what happens in Green Bay. It's in, 2 and a bit weeks when this episode comes out.
Yeah.
This episode comes out on the 12th of April, which would be exactly 3 months after Mike Vrabel was hired as head coach. Obviously, Gerard Mayo only lasted 1 season. Other than being better, you would cross your fingers as Patriots fans, but other than being better than in 2024, what do you think the biggest difference will be now with Mike Vrabel in charge going into 2025 and hopefully beyond?
A lot of it, looking from a fan perspective first, I know you probably mean the team perspective, but just to look at it from the opinion of a fan is the confidence in what they're doing. Because I know it's easy to hindsight and people say that, but when we were sitting here last year with the likes of Gerard Mayo, and a lot of people love Mayo, and I'm not knocking him at all. When they brought him in, it was like, oh, okay, expatriate, let's see what he's got. It was so different when we were looking at it, and it's got nothing to do with the players that they've brought in. It was just generally speaking, when you look at it as the whole, you look at the organisation as a whole, it just felt so much more confidence from Patriots Nation now. I think so anyway. I'm sure there'll be people that disagree, and that's fair enough. But they've made significant changes on the defense, and they even talked about, I think it was yesterday in a press conference, I may be incorrect, I think it was Tuesday in a press conference, they discussed that they were making slight alterations to the play set up on the defense, I think today. So I think Wednesday when they go into the sort of voluntary training program. and they made a lot of additions on the defense, or changes, I suppose you should say. So the defense is going to look different. Hopefully still that Patriots dominance that we see, you know, the aggressiveness that we're used to as Patriots when we watch our defense, hopefully. I think it's exciting. I just want the chaos of the draft over between you and me, and obviously everybody watching. I just like to know now, because it's getting a little bit too much chaotic now. What if they do this? What if they do that? Let's just do it. Let's just get this bit done and see who the team is and just really move forward, because the one thing that we haven't touched upon is the glaring need at left tackle, and how that's barely been addressed, and how Elliot Wolf kind of really dropped the baby on sort of a Okorafor and trying to move people in and out and things like that. Left tackle is still so significant. So I do hope that once we hit after the draft, as we start the talk about preseason and stuff like that, we aren't as concerned about left tackle right now as I am. So
I think a lot, if not every mock draft I've seen, well, that's a nice segue into the draft conversation. Every draft I see pretty much has Will Campbell going for the Patriots at pick 4.
yeah.
Would you, I guess, given that it's such a glaring hole on that roster and how good he is, the best offensive tackle in the draft, you wouldn't have any qualms with that at pick 4?
I know a lot of people are talking about it'd be better to get him a little bit lower, so he's not worth the 4th pick sort of thing. Now, we have to be talking about it if the whole Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter argument has gone. If they've gone prior to the Patriots pick, then you are looking at the draft differently. There are sort of 2 ways to look at this draft, but I think for me personally, if you're at 4, you haven't got Hunter and Carter, and you need a left tackle, I worry about the whole trade down scenario in case you trade down that little bit too far and you lose Will Campbell. Now, you're saying he's not worth like number 4, and I get it, the whole measurables and things like this, but we don't know if he can play, and technically, and we don't know if he can play left tackle in the NFL. Seen him significantly do it well in college, but there's always that transition that's necessary, and he's a little bit undersized, as they say, for a big guy. But for me, it's just, you need a tackle. He has the potential to be a great tackle, and I know that you don't want to, bet number 4 on potential, but there's always that risk if you drop down a little bit and you lose him, and then what? Then you're really looking at, well, have we done the best thing? For me personally, and I know a lot of Patriots fans will sort of throw their hands up and hate this, and I get it. I get why you would. But for me, if they're sitting at 4 and they haven't got Hunter and Carter as an option, and Campbell, for me, it's got to be Campbell, because the left tackle position is so desperate. They need that position so much. And I'm quite happy and ready to see how Campbell can use himself in the NFL. I know he's a little bit undersized. I know those measurables a little bit. I get it. For me, it's not the size, it's what you can do. And I think that if he can do it, then we'll look back and say, that was bang on. We should have done it. So, yeah, I think I'm completely fine and completely happy with Campbell at 4, really.
Who are you then next looking at? Are you in agreement with Johnny, who's a Patriot, right, who said the other big need then is wide receiver?
I'm in agreement that wide receiver... Actually, I don't know if I am in agreement if wide receivers are need right now in that height. I know a lot of Pictures Nation will be going, get her off the screen. And I get it. I totally get it. I think for me, if I'm honest, and this isn't my tight end biased, but it is because of the talent. If Hunter and Carter and Campbell have gone, for whatever reason, I'm taking the tight end Tyler Warren, because he's kind of too good not to. He's kind of too good not to. And it sets us up for the future. Whilst I'd be devastated for a moment, I'd be like lying on the floor going, oh my gosh, left tackle is still a serious need. Once I'd got over that, I'd had my moment of, oh, how are we going to cope? I'd get up and be like, oh, Tyler Warren, yes, because it set us up for the tight endage for the future and stuff like that. So Tyler Warren is definitely it for me if I'm not having to choose. I get the wide receiver need and I get the Ted McMillan, but I'm not quite sure about him myself personally at that high and what they've already got. And I think for me, Tyler Warren would be maybe make a bigger impact and set us up for the future.
We'll quickly end with your hopes and dreams and fears for 2025. As I said, it was 4-13 last year. This is still rebuild mode 100% for the Patriots. No matter, you might have the likes of Diggs there now, but there's no denying this is rebuild mode. I guess the two-part question is, what's your confidence level on a scale of 1 to 10 with Drake May? And what's the ceiling of number of wins the Patriots can get in 2025?
See, I'm going to get sort of homered and, oh, she's so naive for all this kind of stuff, probably by my co-host. Because he calls me that all the time. I think for me, confidence of Drake May, it's well up there. I'm a sort of, I'm at a 9, as long as you put around him what's necessary, because he needs a left tackle. Now, if we go into the season as they are now at tackle and they do nothing, then my confidence level in Drake May will drop because the poor dude's not protected. If they've got a decent starting NFL left tackle, and I don't mean he has to be like the number one in the on the PFF or whatever. I just mean a good one who can do his job, because we haven't had that for a little while. As long as we've got a left tackle who can do his job, then my confidence in May is really high. I'm up there like sort of 9s and stuff like this. My confidence in the whole team, if you don't mind me answering that and just developing onto that, is high as well, because the Vrabel thing has given me such a new lease on confidence. And I try and pride myself in being positive and look at, optimistic and have the, a more shiny outlook as possible. But it has been dreary as a Patriots fan last year. And bringing in Vrabel, it's exciting. And he was a Patriots player, so he's kind of an ex-Patriot, if you see what I mean. And that's always fun, but seeing him the way that we have in the presses and stuff like that, and seeing what he's doing and how aggressive he's being and how cutthroat he's being, because he cut one of my favourites in David Andrews. I know we didn't talk about that, but I was quite devastated when that situation happens. But he is being really cutthroat when it comes to wanting what's best for this team, and he doesn't really care, kind of thing. And whilst that made me sad, I do love it. So I have got that confidence in that. And as regards to sort of ceiling, to be honest with you, people are going to think I'm crazy. I'm up there with, if we get that left tackle, because I think that's a pivotal key. So as long as we do that with the asterisks that they do that significant left tackle, I'm like 9, 10. Let's go. Let's freaking go, baby.
So do you think, if you win 10 games, teams win divisions with 10 games, do you think, I know as much as you hate them very clearly, but I imagine you'd still say that the Bills would top that in 2025?
You're really pushing me to say things I really don't want to say right now. These things don't want to come out of my mouth, quite frankly. But yes, we all recognise how good that team has been. Yeah, the Bills have been. I think I've still got a sandwich bet with my co-host on Pat's Procrastination of that the Patriots will finish second, at least second in the division. I think I'm going to roll that over and stand by that, I think. So maybe the Bills will beat the Patriots. Maybe. I'm not going to commit to it completely just because I can't emotionally, folks. I apologise. But yeah, we all know. I'm not completely dense. I know. I just don't like saying it as a Patriots fan. But yeah, they're still talented. But is the window closing, as they like to say in Patriots Unfiltered? Is the windows for the Bills closing? So who knows? Maybe Mike Vrabel's voyage year will be the decimation of the Bills. I'm really sorry, Bills fans. I'm so sorry. I couldn't help myself. I apologise. But realistically, yeah, I'm going for sort of like second in the division.
Top 2 for the Patriots. That is a Clare Perspective. That is sitting Clare Cooper, as I said at the start, host of A Clare Perspective, co-host of Pat's Procrastination and content producer at Pratt's Propaganda. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciated it. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. It's been fun. Thanks, guys.
A big thank you to Jake, big thank you to Lee and to Dan, and of course to Claire there at the end. Really good to chat AFC East. Be an interesting one to see how the Patriots will build on last season with Drake May. If Justin Fields can spring any excitement in New York with the Jets, Buffalo Bills, of course, the team to beat is the consensus through it. But all the writers seem fairly confident. Dan, maybe less so with the Jets, but being a Jets fan, who can blame him? Thank you very much for listening to this episode 12 of the Huddle UK podcast. We'll be back next week with another divisional breakdown, and then we'll be looking to the NFL draft the week after that. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on the Huddle UK website at www.huddleuk.com, and you'll find clips everywhere on socials: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Blue Sky, X, all the rest of them. So go find us on there. We're usually at Join the Huddle UK. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll catch you next Saturday at 10 a.m. here on the Huddle UK podcast.